Welcome to part 5 of my Family Patterns video learning module series on the big Y-700 DNA test. We all know the value of getting more DNA matches. The more we have, the better our data becomes, and the more likely we are going to be successful in answering our genealogical research questions. The big Y-700 DNA test is no different. So in this particular learning module, we're not going to use our big Y-700 DNA matches, but rather our Y-111 DNA matches as a way to identify others that we can hopefully get them to upgrade to the big Y-700. If you remember, the Y-111 is part of the big Y-700 test, and so it's going to be a great resource for what we're going to do. So on the landing page for FamilyTreeDNA, we are not going to look at the big Y section, but rather above it are the Y111 through the Y12 DNA test results. And we're going to focus in on the Y-DNA matches, which hopefully most of our matches will have at least the Y111. And so what we're going to do is look at those for candidates. Now, when we think about looking at them for candidates, it's going to be important to remember what the Y11 tests, what it looks at. It looks at short tandem repeats. And if you remember from the first video in the learning module series, we talk about the difference between STRs and SNPs. STRs is what the 111 tests. It's great for identifying mutations because they are passed down from future generations. But what is different from STRs than from SNPs is that STRs, or those repeats, can actually mutate back to its original value. And where that becomes problematic is we could have somebody that is not very closely related to us, but because whatever markers that they had that mutated, it mutates back, and it looks like they have the same genetic marker values that we do, when in fact they just happen to mutate backwards to the original value, which makes them look closer. So short tandem repeats, as we've talked about before, is good for identifying general relatedness, but not the level of specificity that we get when we do SNPs associated with the big Y-700. So what we're going to look at is we're going to go to our Y111 matches, and we're going to look at those, and we're going to try to identify individuals who have not taken the big Y-700 test that if we convince them or otherwise communicate with them to upgrade, they will not only improve their results, but they could potentially help us to improve our results as well. And the results that they could really help us improve would not only be to help us refine the time to most recent common ancestor, but potentially could identify other haplogroups that could help us answer questions like, where did we come from? So there is really great value in trying to reach out to others to encourage them to upgrade. Now, I've privatized my list here, and this is only a partial list. Now, you can see here the very first one has taken the Family Finder test and the Y-DNA 11, but it has no big Y tests. The ones below it have, and so there's really no value in contacting them, at least for this phase for prospecting. So we would look at John Doe here and hopefully try to encourage him. But one aspect that we want to consider before realizing whether or not we should try to contact John Doe is we need to look at the genetic distance John Doe is from you, or in this case from me. There's 4 steps, and it can be anywhere from 0 steps and up to 10 steps. And which ones are going to be the most helpful to us? Well, I have an example from my own personal research as well as my own account that can help us and help me convey to you which ones should we look at as our top candidates to get them to upgrade. So if you've watched other learning modules in this series, you've seen how my matches fit within my family tree. And in here, I have a few more matches that aren't in big Y, if you recognize some of these, and you don't others. And if you look on the bottom of each of these testers, labeled from I am A, and they are anywhere from B to G, you can see what test value they have at this level. All of them have 111, but some of them haven't yet upgraded to the big Y. And if you also look, I've also written down there how many steps they are away, or what's their genetic distance, and they vary anywhere from 2 to 6. Some of these are likely to be better candidates than others to upgrade if they haven't already. So let me kind of show you something, analyses that I did. I looked at all of my Y-111 matches. And for those of my 111 matches that have also taken the big Y-700, I've put in this table and of course anonymized them here. I've also included their genetic distance. Now, we know here how I'm related to B through G. And in this list, I've identified where these known cousins fit within that. And as you look at these, most of those that are known within genealogical time, and for me being in the US, is really from the 1700s forward. As we kind of look at those, almost all of them are within 3 steps, or a genetic distance of 3. I want you to note that match F has a genetic distance of 6. Now, where this becomes important is when we look in this last column, where does FamilyTreeDNA suggests our time to most recent common ancestor? When was he likely born? Well, I know that for all of us, which there are 7, including myself, our common ancestor was born in 1784. But because of the way these are suggested to be, the different genetic distances that we see here, the time to most recent common ancestor might be further back because they're not within this particular cluster here, or my haplogroup. So when we look at this, some of my Y-111 matches, like look at the table there for match H, which is up near the top. It has a genetic distance of 2. But FamilyTreeDNA says our common ancestor was likely born around 1510. And if we looked at the not the scientific details, but the time tree, you would actually see that that's pretty accurate. But because of the mutation backwards and forward, it can be a little misleading. Now, let's look at the extreme bottom of this table here. There are some that of my Y-111 matches that when we go up to the big Y-700, I have a genetic distance of 8 or 9 or 10 on the Y-11, but with the big Y, it suggests that we are related back in the 1300s or even earlier there. What this table here should show you from a color standpoint is those that are in the green. Those, what I would say, at least for me being in the US, those in the 1700s, I can probably do something with those matches once they got to the big Y. So if I see any Y-111 matches that have anywhere from 2 to 3 genetic distance, really 0 to 3, I should focus on contacting them first to get them to upgrade. However, once we kind of move past 3, really into 4, and maybe up to 6, look how there's a jump going from the time to most recent common ancestor, my expected results with the big Y, it's pushing back into the 1500s. It might be informative for me from a perspective of maybe where did I originate, or where did my paternal line originate, perhaps in Europe or elsewhere. That might be helpful there, but I'm not likely to find out how, they fit into my line through our direct paternal ancestors. There's probably not a lot of records there to reliably fit them into my tree. So the sweet spot for mine seemed to be anywhere from those Y11 matches between 0 and 3. From even a little bit of 3, but certainly up to 6, I don't really feel good about contacting them and having them upgrade, at least from my perspective, to help me, if I was to be a little bit selfish. Now, if I don't have very many people from 0 to 3, I might contact those from 4 to 7 or 8 and maybe encourage them, because it could be genealogically informative. But once you get to a genetic distance with your Y11 matches in excess of 6, I would say it's more likely to be distracting to you than helpful. So what I would suggest is, when you are looking at your 111 matches, focus in on those that are at the 0 to 3 level. Now, if I wanted to kind of look at this, because I know that not all of us have a lot of 111 matches. I have 33, so I have plenty, not necessarily plenty from my perspective, but enough for me to consider to encourage them to upgrade. But if you don't have that many Y11s, you might consider 67 and 37, those who have tested and are matches there. But please hear this caution. For the 67 markers, I would certainly focus in on those that are genetically distant of not more than 0 or 1. Encourage them to upgrade. And again, assuming the ones on the 67 are not on your 111. And I would maybe only go to the 37 and look at those if I have nothing else to consider on 11 or the 67. I would only go to 37 and maybe look at those that have a 0 genetic distance. Those outside of that are probably not going to be that helpful. I would also, when you are looking at this, whether you're looking at 111, 67, or 37, take a look at people's family trees to the extent that they are published. And they are published there when you see that the family tree icon there that I've highlighted with the yellow arrow in the bottom right-hand corner is darkened blue. Take a look at their family tree. Is there anything interesting there outside of the genetic distance that you might want to consider encouraging them to upgrade? Like, did they reside in the county in the U.S. that your ancestors lived? Maybe that would be interesting to look at. And so take those things into consideration as you consider prospecting your Y111 matches for upgrades to the big Y. So I hope you appreciate or understood what I was trying to convey here with prospecting. And I hope you'll watch the last video, which is really using Y-DNA strategically to answer specific research questions by selecting people that have the unique ability to answer your research question.